Please welcome writer-director Brad Bird. First of all, thank you so much for being here because, you know, spearheading this whole 1999 screening series for Landmark Theaters, I was like, you've got to do The Iron Giant. And I was like, I've got to get Brad Bird. So thank you so much for being here. This means everything to everyone in this audience here. So,
and this is about the number of people that saw it in its original release.
It came out August 6th, 1999, the same weekend as a movie called The Sixth Sense. So, telling you, 99 was just an insanely
Blair
amazing
Witch,
year.
too, you know.
But, Brad, when you came aboard, I mean, this is your first feature as a director. And, at the top of before we even started the screening, I said that this film, it's one of the greatest animated films of all time. But why sort of narrow it to that? It's just one of the best movies ever made, period. It really is. So for your first feature as a director, how did this come about for you, and how far along and how different was The Iron Giant when it did come about for you?
Well, I had been trying to direct for a long time, and you've probably all heard stories of development hell. Well, they're all true. So I was one of those frustrated guys who couldn't seem to get projects backed fully. I could always sell an idea, but then the studio would own the idea, and back then I was super cheap. So they still have some projects that I'd like to make that they still have them. So it really was a series of flukes. It was a series of flukes that came about, and the short version of it is basically everybody had rushed in to all the other companies other than Walt Disney rushed in because they thought that animation was printing money. And they all got their asses kicked. And they were all limping away from the field because it's actually really hard to put together animation teams and then develop them. And you have to put time in a way you don't in live action, because live action is nomadic. People are always available, and certain people become available, and you get the people that are available. With animation, it takes more time to build crews and stuff. So they were starting to get the idea that maybe they shouldn't do animation, and they got pregnant with us just before they decided that they didn't want to do animation. So it was cheaper to finish us than to shut things down, mid-production. So I think that they were planning to put the film on the shelf and just wait for an opening somewhere down the line.
Unbelievable.
And we kept begging them to give us a opening date, and they said, we'll have a test screening. And they had a test screening, and it got the highest scores they'd gotten in 15 years.
Amazing.
And they were not prepared. We had made no deals with companies. There was no posters out in advance. So people really didn't know about it when it was time for it to open.
You know, I asked you just before we walked on here, when was the last time you saw the movie, and what was it like for you to see it, almost 25 years after it originally came out?
Well, I'm just happy that the theaters are full and people are still watching it. It kind of failed utterly, and then when it got on video, people started to see it and started recommending it to other people. So also Turner ran it on like Thanksgiving or something. Several years in a row, they run it for like a day straight, where it just was Iron Giant over and over again. And it became something that kind of stuck around. And so it's really gratifying. I mean, everybody who worked really hard on the film, because it was hard to make, we did it for a lot less money and a lot shorter time than the other films they were doing. We all put our best effort into it. And I didn't know whether I was ever going to get to direct again, so I wanted to make this one count,
Well, you certainly have gotten to direct again, and everyone here loves your movies, and of course, I mean, I saw the film right before it opened at a press screening on the Warner Brothers lot, and I just thought it was a masterpiece. And then, but just, over the years, maybe just a few years later, I started to get the feeling that the movie was really catching on. When did you start to get the impression that people were talking about it, that more people were asking you about the movie?
Well, it changed for us a little bit, like about 2 months after it was released. I mean, they rushed it out on video because they had to get, we got to salvage this somehow kind of mentality. But the Oscars for animation are called the Annie Awards, and we swept the Annie Awards. And we were against Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks and people with a lot more money and time behind their movies. And so that gave us a little a badly needed pat on the back, I'll say. And it started to pick up a little bit from there. The fact that we won all those Annies made a few people sit up, and then the Turner thing, and then video sales started to pick up, and it was just really weird and organic and wonderful.
You won, Iron Giant won 9 Annie Awards, including Best Feature and Best Director, beating Toy Story 2. So there you go. Just saying. Pixar's been good to you, but let's face it. But when you did come,
I think it beat Bug's Life, so almost as good.
What was the project like when you came on? So I'm sure a lot of people realized that Pete Townshend was involved as an executive producer.
Right. Warner Brothers at that time had like 45 projects in development. And if you have that many projects in development, you have nothing in development, because it tells you that you're not focusing on anything. You're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. And I wanted to do a film. I was working for Turner Feature Animation. And I wanted to make the film I'm doing now called Ray Gun. Yeah, hang it. Be there on opening day. That's all I ask of you.
We will.
Anyway, they didn't. Ray Gun was very different than everything they were making. They were trying to make musicals, and Ray Gun was like a film noir action movie, detective in the future, scene from 1939 kind of movie, and. They didn't want to make that. Turner didn't want to make it. Then Turner got bought by Warner Brothers. And so suddenly Warner Brothers owned CNN and the Atlantic Braves and the Cartoon Network and all the things that Turner owned, which is the Warner Brothers Library pre-1947, the MGM Library, over and over, like this massive amount of stuff. And in that massive amount of stuff was the caraway seed of the last 3 months of my contract. And they said, well, we don't want to make Ray Gun. We have lots of projects in development. Pick 3 and let us know what you think. And so I picked 3, and one of them was Iron Giant. And I came back and I said, this is the one that I like. I said, but I have a different sort of take on it. And they said, what? And I said, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? And they went, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? And so they said, we'll get you a meeting on that. So I got a meeting just on the basis of that one-line pitch. And I went in there, and the executives, the sort of lower-level executives that got me the meeting, we were all sitting around the table. The heads of the studio were there. And they said, well, Brad here has a very promising take on the Iron Giant. Brad? And I said, what if a gun had a soul and wanted to be a gun? And they all went, oh, what if a gun had a soul and wanted to be a gun? And my execs were very happy. They were like very proud. And then I started pitching the story, and they became scared shitless because none of this stuff had been run past them. And I just started going, it's 1959, or 1957. Sputnik's in the air. And, I start doing this. There's this beatnik character. He owns a junkyard. And there's this government guy named Kent Mansley. And he's, they started going white. But then the pitch started going well. Yeah. And about halfway through the pitch, I saw one of them nudge the other one, like you should start writing this down. So he was writing down what the story was as I was pitching it. And they actually went to another guy while they were negotiating for my contract, 2 other guys, and they gave him their notes and said, write a treatment. And if I hadn't been smart enough to register my version with the Writers Guild, I wouldn't have gotten screen story credit.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And yes, the Kobayashi Maru can be defeated if you,
That's a Star Trek reference, folks.
right? Same
Yeah,
summer, right?
Rathacon.
Yeah.
Rathacon. So, well,
I knew that.
I want to ask, sorry, my reputation.
No,
precedes me,
it's.
So, what were some of the early ideas that you had? I mean, obviously that pitch is what we saw.
Well, they had it in development with Pete Townshend and Des McAnuff, who was the co-producer with Allison, as a musical, because Pete Townshend loved that story. It's very famous in the UK. It's not famous in the United States, and it's called The Iron Man. Right. But they couldn't call it The Iron Man in the United States because of the Marvel character. So they called it The Iron Giant in the United States. But it's a very well-known story, and he had done it as a musical theater piece, and there was a concept album that you can buy of the songs from The Iron Giant. So they were trying to do musicals, and they thought this will be a kind of an unusual musical, and it would have been. And one of the saddest things in my life was telling Pete Townshend, who's like a legend, that I didn't see the movie the same way. You know, I had to tell him that I don't want to do it as a musical. You know, I love your music, but I don't want it as a musical.
Was he like, okay, I get it?
He was, you could tell, deeply disappointed, but he was also a mensch about it. And he stayed on the film as a producer. So, I give him a lot of credit,
So when it came to casting, obviously you have an incredible cast. What made Eli Marienthal the perfect Hogarth? This is his first movie, too.
He just came in and did a really great audition. He was wide open, and he just seemed like the all-American kid, had a strong personality, and he was a good actor, too, and a couple of times I had to go a little bit method with him. We needed him shivering, which is a really hard thing to fake. Oh, for the water. Yeah, for the water, where he says, "This is really refreshing." I'm not a mean guy, but I made a little tub of water and filled it with ice, and he had to stand in it for a few minutes. And so the shivers are real. And he indulged me. He was a trooper in the greatest sense. And so, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the other thing is that, so in 1999, animation was really making the transition to what we see now, which is just computer animation. But the 2D animation just works so perfectly for when the movie actually does take place, which is 57. But this does represent a groundbreaking leap forward in animation because you're mixing 2D and computer CG animation. So what was behind the decision to do the Giant in a more advanced animated format?
Well, it seemed made to order because the Giant comes from another planet, but we didn't want him to seem like he was a separate medium. We felt, and it's a fine movie, but we felt that the ballroom scene in Beauty and the Beast felt like hand drawing over a computerized background. And we didn't want that separation. We wanted it to feel all like one thing. So I said to the technical guys, let's imagine that Disney is at the height of their powers. They have 1,000 people working on this, and people can draw a geometric thing like the Giant in a very consistent way. Now, super hard things are hard to do in hand-drawn animation because we're just not that perfect. So they wobble, and things that are supposed to look hard look soft. And there are things like planes or automobiles or giants are very hard to pull off. For some reason, the Japanese are very adept at it. If they, the ones that they did, they're super into detail, and they can do it. But American animators are not so hot on it, and they'd rather die than do it. So we said, what if this were hand drawn, but by really, really good people? So what that meant is that there are imperfections in the line. Because that's the way it is with people. So it spent 6 months creating a computer program to randomize the line and make it imperfect rather than perfect. So it introduces flaws in it that we could control. We could turn them up or down depending on the shot. And they married with the imperfect hand drawings that were going with them. The other thing we did was animators, if they have a slower action, they do 2 exposures for each drawing, which is 12 drawings a second rather than 24. Wow. And they usually do it when it's a slow action because it's half as many drawings, but it still looks good. We did that. The computer wants to do everything perfectly. So it gives you smooth action and 24 drawings a second that are all perfect. And we didn't want that. So we deleted every other frame. It was made for us, but it would have been smoother, but it didn't look like it was the same as the hand-drawn animation. So we had to analyze what hand-drawn animation is and how do we get that effect. And now you see the Spider-Man, Spider-Verse movies, they do that. The computers put out perfectly smooth 24 drawings a second animation, but they eliminate half the drawings and then hit each time 2s, so it looks more like a hand-drawn cartoon.
Amazing. And those Spider-Verse movies are brilliant as well.
But we were first.
You were first, absolutely. Like way first. One of the things that I love about this movie, watching it over the years repeatedly and just loving it every single time and still just getting to those last 15 minutes and just really just bring in the feels, is just how it's for everybody. It's a 4-quadrant film. It's for men and women, old, young, and how there are so many classic themes that we see in like E.T. and Frankenstein. Like, how did you balance all of that to just create just such a perfect, seamless film that appeals to everyone?
I think that, if you think about making movies in a logical way, your job is to find something that's entertaining for everybody, regardless of age, country, of origin, what kind of day they've had. You don't know, and you're supposed to figure it out 2 to 3 years in advance. What does the world want to see 2 or 3 years in advance? And everybody's different. Everybody has different tastes, so how do you appeal to? It's an impossible job, and if you think about it, you'll just go into a corner and turn into a fetal ball. So I think that it's way too complex to think about it that way. So the simple way to think about it, which seems to work for me, is I just go into a nice movie theater in my mind and the lights dim and the curtains open. I go, what do I want to see? And if I can make something that makes me interested, that makes me lean forward, and or a twist that surprises even me, then I think that there might be a chance that other people will feel the same way. And that keeps you sane, because you can't know what people want or like. You can only know what you like and hope that other people have that connection with you.
Let's talk about how you got the sound, particularly the voice of the Iron Giant. Obviously, the voice is Vin Diesel, but there is still an effect there. So how did you sort of experiment with Vin Diesel's voice?
Well,
to get it right?
First of all, he wasn't a star when we got him. Yeah. He was just coming around. He had done Saving Private Ryan, but it wasn't out yet.
Oh.
And he had done a film to promote himself, which was really smart. It was only about 15 minutes long. It was called Multifacial. And what it was saying that it was very hard to pinpoint what his race was. And so the film is about an actor, him, going up for different parts. And he goes out for a Hispanic part, he goes out for a black part, he goes out for a white part, he goes out for an Italian part. And everybody believes that he's that. So he does an audition with an actress. And she starts speaking to him in Spanish afterwards, and he's just like, I don't know what you're saying. But it showed his versatility. It showed that he was inventive, and he had this amazing voice that came from underneath the bowels of the earth, you know. And so one of the people on our crew knew him and said, you should get this guy. And I saw the film, and I went, he's perfect. And so it started with him. And then we added little creaks and things to his voice. So if he was working his jaw or something, we found creaks that would go well with the voice. And we added a tinniness and a rumble to his voice as well. Randy Tom is the sound designer. And so between all of those things, it kind of makes it sound like it's coming from him.
Also, in 1999, you had the movie Office Space, starring Jennifer Aniston. So
Come on,
99,
Office
yeah,
Space.
come on, Jennifer, Office Space, right?
Yeah.
I need that red stapler back. But 99 was obviously a great year for her. She was also at the peak of the Friends of it all, because I think it was in its 5th or 6th season by the time this opened. But what made her perfect? What were the first conversations you had with her? And did she get to meet Eli at any point? Because you were...
She did. She met him on the day where he was freezing, and he was very psyched to meet her. She was actually the studio suggestion, and it was the only studio suggestion that I really liked. So they wanted, at one point, they wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger for Kent, and John Travolta for Dean, and he might have been good. I like Travolta, and I actually like Arnold as well, but Harry was more what I had in mind, and you know, I had to get no's from all these people before I could go after the ones I wanted. And I wanted Chris, who did
McDonald.
Kent Mansley. He was in a lot of movies and supporting roles, and he was always really funny. He was the competitive golfer against Adam Sandler in Happy Madison?
Happy Gilmore.
Happy Gilmore.
He was
that's
in
it. Billy Madison.
He was the abusive husband in Thelma and Louise.
Thelma and Louise.
Great.
Yeah, great. Thelma, damn it. He's also in Hacks. He's in Hacks.
Yeah, which
and he's
just
great
won
in Hacks.
Best comedy series
Yeah.
at the Emmys. Okay. Also, just I want to ask you about the score. The music is beautiful. How did you find the right composer, the right tone of the music?
Well, I listen to a lot of tapes. That's what you do when you are looking for music people, and there's a million of them out there. Once word gets out that you're looking, you get bombarded. Yeah. Michael Kamen had really good stuff on his reel, and it was inventive. You know, he did Die Hard and Lethal Weapon and some of those action movies, but he also did Baron Munchausen and other films for Terry Gilliam. But he was versatile. I mean, I remember there was one guy, and I felt really sorry for him. You not only get tapes, but you see scenes from the movies and their score. And the poor guy had to do an action sequence between two stars. I won't name them because you'll figure out what the movie is. It wasn't a success. But I'm looking at the reels, and it's this very poorly done fight between these two guys. And there's like no emphasis, no filmmaking stuff. It's the antithesis of something like Die Hard, which is just a masterpiece. Yeah. And there's nothing happening, and the music's just going na 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 na. And then finally, one guy jumps, and it's like a starving man jumping on a bone. It's like, and then it goes back to, and Michael's reels didn't have those kind of choices. That guy was in a tough spot because the director wasn't giving him anything to work with. But Michael's scores were big, and they ran the gamut from modern to classical, and he's classically trained. So we couldn't spend a ton of money on it, But he didn't take that as a limitation. He just said, we'll go to Prague, and you can get amazing musicians for a lower price there. And they are not as good on take one as Hollywood is, because Hollywood musicians know how to look at a score once and they go bam and hit it, you know. But by take three, they're better than most anyone on earth because they play together all the time. They're not assembled by the movie. They're the orchestra that plays every week together. So they're exact. So when they do pizzicato strings, they might have, 20 strings, but they're all hitting exactly at the same point. And so it was fantastic watching them do the score.
While you were working on the film, when you were deep into production and you were starting to really, and also in animation, between the live action you've done and the animation you've done, obviously animation, you try a scene. If it works, if it doesn't, you go back, you bring back your cast for a voiceover, and you redo a scene. But when did
try
you
try not to redo a scene?
Try not to.
Yeah.
But I heard Tom Hanks talking about that with Toy Stories. They did that a lot. But when did you start to feel like you've got something really good, really special here?
Well, we did, as I mentioned, we didn't have a lot of money, and so our layout was pretty simple. And the interesting thing was that executives were clearing out, like every month we'd lose an executive. And pretty soon, about 2/3 of the way through the movie, there was nobody up there. So it was kind of like having free run of the Titanic. I mean, you could go anywhere you want. You could smoke the cigars. You could drink whatever. The floor is going to get tilty pretty soon, but you can go anywhere. It's just that you're going to be on the bottom of the ocean and pretty soon. So we knew that they were closing the division down as we were making the film. Yeah, it was crazy. What was the question originally?
When did you start to feel like you were like, hey,
okay. So instead of a projection room, which would be nice, we didn't have it. We could use it, but it was occasional. We couldn't review stuff in it. So we reviewed stuff in the editor's room. Darren Holmes, and I know there's a fan club here tonight. Yeah. So we went into Darren's room, and I wanted all the heads of every department to be there at once. I think things happen when people are physically sharing the same space. So we were like those. Have you ever seen those photographs of, like in the 40s, it was a trend to try to pack phone booths, and people would try to set the record for the number of people jammed into a phone booth. Sure. Phone booths. Nobody knows what they are anymore. See an old version of Superman.
Google it.
But in any case, we were wall-to-wall human flesh watching the scenes. And the scene that we were watching was the first animation of Hogarth explaining death to the giant. And we had a temporary score in there that was good, meaning that it kind of had the right tone. And we were watching it together, and they were dead quiet, and I looked around, and people were like crying. And this was rough footage. This was not even finished footage, and I kind of had a feeling that this might work,
Just over the years, like after the movie came out, did somebody come up to you, or someone, whether it's in a professional setting, someone that you never expected to be a fan of The Iron Giant, tell you how much they love the movie, like whether it's a celebrity or whoever?
Well, for filmmakers, you like to hear from filmmakers. So, yeah, I have some good fans. Spielberg, okay. Yeah.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. He gave me my first chances in the business, too, so that was particularly gratifying. James Cameron is a fan, and so there's some pretty good people.
So 25 years later, 25 years after the movie opened, what is the legacy of The Iron Giant?
Hopefully it kind of gets into rotation, and I love the fact that it's organic, that people are recommending it. It's not because we carpet bombed advertising or anything like that. It's it's just word of mouth, really, and that's the best kind of advertising you can get, and it's the hardest to get. So I'm not going to beg for anything. It's just whatever you're doing, just keep doing it because it's really great. It's very satisfying for anybody who worked on the film. Darren, why don't you stand up? Come on.
Stand up, Darren.
There he is.
Yay, all right.
So Darren did a wonderful job on the film. Years later, I got put onto Ratatouille, and lo and behold, there was Darren again. And so we did Ratatouille together, and now we're doing Ray Gunn together. So,
well, you're doing Ray Gunn, and for those of you who maybe don't know, he's also doing Incredibles 3. So I just want to ask, big favor, if everybody could just please stay seated while we exit, that would be really, really, really helpful. Once again, thank you so much for coming out to tonight's very special 25th anniversary screening of The Iron Giant on the big screen. Give it up for Brad Bird, ladies and gentlemen.